So I took a slab of birch, made a transition strip out of it. Stick around and I'll show you how I did it. So I just went and ripped out my old transition, this cheap MDF. This lasted a few years, but time to replace it. So I made this one. I had some 10-foot live edge birch. I took the narrowest one where I could get 2.5 inches off of it. Took my track saw, cut the live edge off, and then put that edge up against my fence on my table saw. When I milled it down, it was a little too much that I had to take off to do it on my jointer. So I took it over to my CNC with a surfacing bit and took almost a 1/4 inch off. I then took that edge, put it down on my planer, and planed it down to 1/2 inch, what you see here. It hasn't been sanded or anything yet. I'm going to put the edges on. But before I did anything, I milled a piece of softwood cedar down to see if this design would work. And what I did was I put a pretty big bevel here, and then I put a smaller bevel on this side. And then I took my saw blade, raised it up to 3/8 of an inch, and then just cut a bunch of different strips in here to make this transition. And then took this into the house to make sure this would work. It does, so now I need to put this design onto this board. See how it goes. This fence attaches to my table saw fence. And I use these micro jig clamps. I'm going to make this fence even with that bearing. For really low pieces, then I made the spacing on my fence so I could put the feather board in here if I needed to. Okay, now for the other side, I'm going to do this in 2 passes. So I'll raise this up a little bit from where it was, cut a bevel, and then I'll run it through a second time when I raise it up all the way. Now I'm going to raise this bit up all the way to where the bottom is just below my table. That's the maximum bevel I can get out of that bit. Run it through again. I like this blade because it's got a flat tooth on it. This allows me to put a flat bottom whenever I put a rabbet in. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim right at the very end, and then I'll keep moving over until I hit my 1.25 inches, which is halfway. I could put a dado stack in here, make it go a lot faster, but I'm feeling kind of lazy. Now I'll move it over shy of 1/8 inch. Make another cut. I took my little planer and flattened this out, smoothed it. Now it's time to sand it down. Finish it. This is already pretty smooth because I went through the planer. So I'm going to start with 180 and work my way up. In between 220 and 320. I like to put a little water on the wood. Get the grain to pop. Once that dries, I'll hit it with 320. Now it's time for finish. All the rest of the finish in my house is birch with amber shellac on it, so I'm going to continue that. Normally I buy shellac de-waxed, just flakes, and I use a coffee grinder, an old one of course, and grind it up into fine powder and mix it with denatured alcohol. Makes a great finish. but I don't have any amber on me. I don't feel like waiting 10 days for Amazon to ship it to me. So I went to Lowe's and bought the amber shellac. The problem with this shellac is it's a 3-pound cut. It's way too much. So I'm going to thin this out to something more reasonable. And with the powdered shellac, I usually go with 1.5 pound to 2-pound cut. And on the back, it gives you how much denatured alcohol to use for which cut you want. I want a 1.5 pound cut, so I'm going to just mix this 50-50. Just using a little Dixie cup. It's my shellac jar. 1 of shellac and 1 of denatured alcohol. Ah. I need to get a spout or something for that. And that's going to make a nice thin finish, 1.5 pound cut of shellac. Now I've got these little squirt bottles I bought off Amazon. These make great applicators. Now what I always do is I put the date that I made this shellac. Now I'll just take this. And put it on nice and thin. And this is going to dry real fast. So much denatured alcohol in it, it just evaporates right away. So I can put several coats on it within the next couple hours. That's one thing I really like about this finish. I don't have to wait 8 hours. Now I'm going to let that sit, and then I'll hit it with some steel wool or a finishing pad. Okay, it hasn't even been 10 minutes and it's completely dry to the touch. Combination of a thin cut, a thin coat, makes it dry really quick. So between coats I use this white pad that I got off Amazon, and this will just make this nice and smooth. Any dust or dog hair will be taken up by this. Now on to the next coat. Now that amber is starting to come out in the wood. The thing about shellac, it just gives the wood such depth. It's so easy to apply, and it makes the wood look fantastic. Okay, give that another 10-15 minutes and I'll check. Okay, this is my 6th coat. I only waited about 20 minutes between coats. After wiping this down with the white pad, I'm going to use some 600 grit wet sandpaper. Now I have done a shellac finish all the way up to 2000 grit. This one I'm just going to do with 600 and see how it turns out. And what I'm going to use for lubricant is just a plain mineral oil. It's got to keep enough mineral oil on here. Just make it nice and easy to slide. And you could feel it getting smoother. I'll just get a paper towel and wipe up the excess. And you could just see that shine come through. Now you can continue with finer and finer grits, and the sheen will get to a real glossy finish. I think this sheen's going to be perfect. It pretty much matches what's in my house now, so I'm going to stop at 600 and go install it. Very small heads on them. make them ideal for finish work. Just don't want anything to split at this point. Just below the surface. Well, thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. Some of the things I would have done differently, I definitely would have put my dado stack in next time I'll do that. There's a lot of work getting a chisel and planing this down to level when I could have just used my dado stack. Other than that, I'm really happy the way it turned out. As you're milling your lumber, you should think about making it extra long. That way you can cut off a portion of it. Use that, since it's the same thickness, to cut your template into it. Bevel, round over, whatever you want on there. And that way you could take it to your floor, make sure it fits, and then use that template to make your final strip. Anyway, fun project. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to like and subscribe.